ESPN.com, NFL Insider KC Joyner here on the Sports Bash, 97.3 ESPN. A glorious Friday as always to you, my friend. How are you?
Doing well, yourself?
We're doing really well. As, man, who would have thought 6 weeks in that we would have a discussion about whether or not we really can say that the Eagles are the most complete team in football, KC? Is the NFL world on the right axis here? The Eagles at the top of the charts? It can't be, can it?
It can be. I mentioned kind of last couple weeks that I do and we have NFL Power Rankings in ESPN, and the way it does it is you pull it has listings of random matchups that says like Oakland Raiders versus Philadelphia Eagles. Who do you think will win? And you pick which team you think would win, and then it weighs all those rankings. And early in the season, and me and everybody else on ESPN were picking, Eagles are a good team, but not a great team. And anymore, anytime I see the Eagles come up, there's only like a couple of teams who I have to even think, okay, who I would pick that team over the Eagles. So that's where they are right now.
Who's in the conversation? That's the thing I have. Like, if you hesitate to say Philadelphia, which, I have a hard time just saying, yes, they're definitively the best. Who are some of – there's a lot of two-loss teams, but some of them have only played 5 games. The league just seems littered with good average teams, no real great teams. So who are some of the teams that are in the conversation after Kansas City lost now for the second week in a row?
Yeah, the thing is when they show that listing, it's supposed to be who do you think would win if these teams played on a neutral field. So most of the time, I pick Philadelphia, but if I had to think who could beat Philadelphia on a neutral field, I would think Pittsburgh. If Pittsburgh plays to its talent level, I would think they could. They're one of the teams that comes up in that conversation. Seattle might, but I'm still not convinced on their offensive line. But, now that Green Bay's lost Aaron Rodgers, they would have been in that list if they could get people in the shootout and things. But there's not that many. Atlanta, they're not the same team without Kyle Shanahan as their coordinator. It's just there's not that many clubs where you can say the Patriots, maybe if they could get in a shootout, but the way their defense is, I still think Philadelphia's a more complete team. So, yeah, there's only a couple, 3, 4.
Let me ask you this. Last year, this team defensively, Jernigan in, Logan out. The secondary pretty revamped, at least on the corners. What is it that has this team so different this year? Receivers obviously different. Offensive line almost the same. A lot of the same. Obviously they got LeGarrette Blount back there. Ryan Matthews out. But so what to you is the key element that has this team playing at such a high level?
What they did with their receivers and what they did with their passing game. Because Carson Wentz now, you could argue that he's a top 10 quarterback, and you can look at vertical metrics, you can look at short pass metrics, you can look at his decision making, which is still leaves a little bit to be desired now and then. But you can look at a lot of these factors. And last year it was like they were having to. You could only get as far as your play calling could get. So hey, we'll call a creative screen and we'll get a guy open. We'll call this play, and now they've got guys, especially with the development of Aguilar. Now they've got a good slot receiver. Now they've got a good outside receivers, and they've got maybe the best tight end in the NFL right now, the way Ertz is playing. So you start to add all that together, that gives their offense something that it didn't have last year, and I think it's allowing them to run a more diverse system on offense.
How about Carson Wentz? He's the number 1 Vegas odds MVP of the league right now. Number 1, do you view him as that? And number 2, is he a legit, serious MVP candidate?
He is right now. It's real early to be saying that he could. He's an MVP, but as well as they're playing right now, I think you could put him in there. The thing about it is, I did this report for ESPN, this article about the best and worst offensive lines in the league. And if you're looking at the Eagles, you're looking at their offense. Their offensive line ranks as a D+ overall and a C- in run blocking and a D+ in pass blocking. They're capable of better than that. So when I look at Wentz, I go, they haven't been blocking quite as well for him as we'd be thinking, not even close. Can you imagine that offensive line really starts to play to its talent level? Then you'll be able to say, okay, now Wentz is getting elite blocking. If that's the case, then he's going to be able to do some things that some of the other quarterbacks who are ahead of him are going to do, and then I think he may be an MVP candidate.
They seemingly have that balance. They can run the ball, they can throw the ball. On defense, they stop the run really well. They're going to get Darby back. That should help them in the secondary. Where is 6 games in, 5-1? Where's their weakness still?
I've got that those metrics for run blocking called good blocking rate, good blocking yards per attempt. Those are my 2 main metrics in that. And Philadelphia in defense, they rank 3rd in good blocking rate allowed. So they're not giving the opposing team very many opportunities to get good runs, but they're 30th in good blocking yards per attempt. They allow nearly 10 yards per carry when another team gets a big, gets a big running play. That's not a metric that you can live with if you're going to be facing, say, Dallas, if you're going to be facing, say, even Green Bay, who Aaron Jones has revamped their rushing attack. You get to Atlanta when they've got Freeman and they've got Coleman. If you go in a matchup against them and you're giving up big gainers, even if you're stopping the run a lot of the time, it's going to be the sort of thing that comes back to haunt you. So they really need to get that in check because you can't allow 10 yards per carry in that case.
We're talking with KC Joyner here on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. The Eagles are off till Monday. When Casey does his appearance on Monday, we'll really take a look at some of the key matchups to watch in that game. So while we're here on this Friday, let's take a look at some of the key matchups around the league. Last night, let's first go to that one. What did we learn about Kansas City? You kind of hinted at it last week, Casey, that they are starting to slip a little bit. They scored 30 last night, but what'd you think about Kansas City and Oakland last night?
I mentioned in some of my articles for ESPN earlier in the week that I wouldn't have thought that Amari Cooper was going to do what he did, 200-plus yards receiving, 2 touchdowns, 19 targets. I wouldn't have thought that, but when you look at Kansas City's pass rush is near the bottom of the league, and the Raiders, their pass blocking has been pretty good, but they hadn't allowed Carr to go downfield. And the thing is, that matchup last night, because they knew they weren't going to get any kind of a pass rush, they figured they could let them do that. So if Kansas City doesn't get their pass rush fixed, this is going to be a problem from the whole season.
All right, that was the Thursday night matchup. You heard the game right here on 97.3 ESPN. Let's take a look at the Sunday matchups here and see what we got with KC Joyner, ESPN.com, NFL Insider. All right. Tampa Bay, who are the Buccaneers? They were a team that a lot of people liked offensively. Thought we'd see this big explosive offense with Evans and D-Jack and O.J. Howard and Doug Martin's back and Jameis Winston. They're going to Buffalo here, and the Bills have kind of surprised a little bit. They went down to Atlanta and won a game. So can the Bills get themselves to 4-2?
I think they can because Winston's battling that shoulder injury, and you're right, their offense has not hit the vertical passes that you would expect them to hit, and Buffalo's got a shutdown run defense too, so I think it's a matchup to where it's going to have to be Winston hitting big passes, and I just don't trust them to do it this week.
Carolina coming off the Thursday nighter. They're going to face Trubisky, who, didn't play great last week, but he had a big play late in that game. He moves around with his feet. They run the ball well with Howard. So Carolina on the road, do they rebound after losing to the Eagles?
I think they do. Trubisky, they're not ready to do much with him yet. I only think he threw like 19 passes last week, and the Bears ran the ball 54 times for 200-plus yards. I don't think they're going to do that against Carolina, and I think that one-dimensional system is just not going to work against Carolina offense. Is pretty explosive. KC,
you got Tennessee, who looked good on Monday. In the second half of that game, they really started to get going. They're a different team with Mariota. Let's be honest here. They're going to Cleveland, who's going to change quarterbacks again. Tennessee, any chance they stub their toe in Cleveland?
They could. Cleveland has one of the best rush defenses in the league. When you look at their run defense metrics, they've got some superb good blocking yards per attempt metrics. So I think they'll be able to slow down the Titans' rushing attack. But you're right, with Mariota coming back and look at the connection he had with Decker last week. He's got Delaney Walker. I just think that's going to be too much for Cleveland.
All right, KC Joyner breaking down all the Week 7 matchups with us here. How about this one? New Orleans has played really well, but they're going on the road. Even when they're pretty good, they're not a great road team. But Brett Hundley making his first NFL start here for the Packers at Lambeau. Can the Saints be taken serious by winning against a backup in Green Bay?
They're going to need to try and get that into a pass-based mode, but I'm going to be curious to see if Green Bay is going to go with the dink-and-dunk passing attack they had with Rodgers. There's no reason that Hundley can't operate that same kind of attack. It's not a lot of risky passes, and Green Bay can run the ball well, but Green Bay's got a lot of injuries in their secondary, and I just think that's not a place you want to be against New Orleans.
By the way, Green Bay with Hundley, should they stick with him? Should they look around for possible replacement? That's a tough offense to learn on the fly.
Yeah, the thing is they should have made that decision prior to the season. You don't want to be chasing a quarterback in Week 6 and things. I'll say this, Hundley is one of the most prolific quarterbacks in Pac-12 history, so he's got a history of carrying an offense. I think he's going to do better than most people think.
By the way, speaking of Aaron Rodgers, he has officially been placed on the injured reserve by the Packers, ending his season. Jacksonville's defense, are they for real enough to go on the road against a Colts team that really just doesn't have an identity? Brissett has been good at times, but Jacksonville on the road with that defense against this Indianapolis team.
Jacksonville's rush defense is still abysmal. They're one of the worst rush defenses, and you can almost pick your metric, and they're not good. Indianapolis has a better rushing offense than people think. Gore had a little skipping his step in the Monday night game, and they've got Max, so they might have a 1-2 punch. I think Jacksonville's going to have some problems.
All right, Casey Joyner's with us here. That should be interesting to see. That Jacksonville team's a tough team to get a read on. How about Arizona last week? Reborn Adrian Peterson. Do they lean on him again against I thought the Rams defense has been better in, last year when they weren't as good of a team. Their defense isn't seemingly as good this year. Now, this game is over in London, so these games always a little wonky to begin with, but a high-flying Rams team against this Arizona team that got torched by Carson Wentz here, so this one should be kind of interesting.
Should be. Arizona's offensive line had its best run-blocking performance last week. I think they were fired up by the fact they have Peterson. Rams stopped the run pretty well, though, so I think that's going to be slowed down a little bit. And the Rams did an article for ESPN's Insider section grading offensive lines. They have the best offensive line in the NFL after 6 weeks, and I think that's going to be the difference.
Do you agree that their defense isn't as good as it was last year?
I agree to an extent, but I think they still can stop the run really well, and I think I think that they're a defense in transition. I think they're transitioning better of late. So I think that they'll get Carson Palmer to throw some picks.
All right, Casey Joyner's with us. We're looking at Week 7, some interesting matchups, including this one in the AFC East. Miami's coming on a little bit. They ran the ball 130 for Ajayi last week. New York, they battled with the Patriots last week. They're going on the road. I think they beat Miami earlier this year, if memory serves. So can New York go down to Miami and keep their name involved in wild card contention? Now, they'd be in contention for the East, mind you.
That's incredible. I think the Jets, who are supposed to go 0-16, could be 4-2, and could be contending for the division lead at this point. Problem for them is that Miami had the worst good blocking rate after 4 weeks of the season, but the past 2 weeks they blocked a lot better, and I have a feeling that they're gonna. That's the key to their team because Gase wants to run a run-first offense, and I think they're going to be able to do it this week. So Miami wins that one.
Okay, Jay Ajayi, people out there, listen up for that. See if he can have another big week. He's had a couple 200-yard games in his career. How about Baltimore? Can't read them at all. Minnesota's defense pretty good. They're at home. They're not going to have Bradford possibly for the rest of the year. They could get Bridgewater back, but it's going to be Case Keenum again against this Ravens team that really doesn't have an identity. They beat the good teams. They lose to the bad teams.
Yeah, and Minnesota, though, Minnesota's rush defense is really good. Minnesota's got a shutdown secondary. Minnesota can ball hawk. They can rush the passer. I just see Baltimore can do some things. They have a big play team. They can get special teams, and they can get some defensive touchdowns. But I just don't think in an offense they could do much. And plus, they're trying to switch from pass first to run first right now. It's not working for them. So I think Minnesota wins handily.
What happens with Flacco down there? He's got big money. Do they have a tough decision to make with him?
The question is always, is he elite? But then again, you look at the players he has around him. You got Macklin, you got Wallace, who's an older guy who's not very good at all. So I'm looking at this going, he doesn't have the players around him, so I'd like to see him be in a better situation. So I think they need to keep him because I don't know that he's the problem. I think that their offensive talent around him is the problem.
All right, Casey Joyner here talking NFL Week 7. We go to San Francisco. They have fought, they have scratched, they have clawed. They've come up empty every single time. They're going to face this Dallas team, Casey, that's been disappointing. They get Ezekiel Elliott back for at least this week and most likely next week too. So can Dallas go on the road where they haven't been able to win at home? Will the road be friendlier for the Cowboys?
The 49ers are going to be able to run the ball because Dallas's run defense is doing very poorly in those run metrics. And mind you, they've got high players. So I have a feeling that San Francisco is going to keep this game closer than people expect, but they've got defensive problems, and plus, you've got Zeke versus their defense, too. So I think it's going to be a high-scoring game, but Dallas wins it.
All right, Casey Joyner's with us. Let's go to New York. The Giants surprised everybody last week, Casey, by winning that game in Denver. Now they're at home. Do you feel any better that they're at home taking on Seattle, who doesn't typically travel well? They're going across the country here. So, Seahawks in New York against the Giants. Do the Giants keep their season alive?
I don't think so. Their run offense, everybody's talking about Darkwa, and he's been a great fantasy pickup, but he gained 117 yards despite getting some of the worst run blocking New York had all year, and that's saying something for them. So and Seattle's rush defense is really good, so I think Darkwa's going to have problems replicating what he did last week. And if he doesn't break out a triple digits, they're not going to win. Yeah, that's the kind of thing you wonder if the Giants are going to try to reestablish the run after finally running the ball pretty well against Denver on what was that, Sunday night or Sunday night last week. Those two teams played. All right, division matchup here. Bengals have won a couple of games after firing the offensive coordinator. Pittsburgh defense looks really good. They put up
19 points, so not impressive offensively, even though their skill players had a lot of numbers last week. They still only scored 19, but is this the week at home that the numbers and the points add up to a big-time Pittsburgh win?
The thing people aren't talking about the Steelers is their defense is really good. Their pass defense has been very good. They got one of the deepest secondaries in the league. They're one of the best pass rushing teams in the league. Their run defense has been hit or miss, but it's been more hit than miss. And Cincinnati, I mentioned that offensive line article I did, they rank 31st, their offensive line did. Only the Colts were worse than the Bengals. So that's going to be the difference because the Steelers are the second best offensive line in the league.
All right, breaking down the games, Denver at L.A. to take on the Chargers. This one's kind of interesting here. You got Denver's defense who got blitzed on the ground last week. The Chargers with Melvin Gordon, will they try to run the ball, reestablish that after seeing what the Giants did last week to Denver? So, Phillip Rivers, he knows this Denver team well. Your take on Chargers-Broncos.
The formula is similar to what happened with the Denver game. Again, Denver's run defense actually played really well. They only allowed a 23.8% good blocking rate against the Giants, but when they gave up big plays, it was 20 and 30-yard gains. That's exactly what Melvin Gordon does. The Los Angeles Chargers have a very bad good blocking rate, but when he gets good blocking, Gordon can break up big gainers. So I like them to repeat that formula. I think they're going to pull off the upset.
All right, that one should be fun, and we got another one that was great the last time we saw it. Will it live up to the billing? The Super Bowl rematch on Sunday night in a game you can hear right here on 97.3 ESPN. Sunday night's coverage begins at 7:30. Falcons, who have lost 2 games at home, inexplicably, they had a 17-0 lead last week against Miami and figured out a way to lose that game. New England's defense has not had the best season, but they still have Tom Brady. So, Patriots, Falcons, how do you see it?
I'll be curious to see if the Falcons decide they want to get this game into a shootout or not, because they want to be a run-first team under Sarkisian, much more than they did under Shanahan. And Sarkisian's not anywhere near as creative an offensive coordinator. But the Patriots, their run defense is terrible. Their pass rushing metrics are terrible, so their pass defense metrics are terrible. So I'll be curious to see if Atlanta decides it wants to get into that kind of game. I have a feeling they won't, and it should be interesting because I think New England's going to be able to dictate the game more in Atlanta. All
right, and then, of course, on Monday night, we'll break down the Eagles and the Redskins further on Monday's segment with KC Joyner here on the Sports Bash. Detroit and Houston, by the way, just 2 teams have the bye this week. So it's a very interesting schedule. 6 weeks in, we've got the Eagles at the top at 5-1. And really, KC, we got Cleveland and San Francisco. New York with just the 1 win, but it's almost as if, 28 of the 32 teams are in play still?
Yeah, it looks like it, and even San Francisco's more talented. I mean, I think Cleveland could be actually go undefeated. And plus, they've got talent too. But even those 2 teams, as bad as they are, I don't think they're necessarily they're not too far away from being able to be spoilers. I'll put it that way. So yeah, I mean, this is a really competitive season.
Yeah, it should be interesting to see. Once we get to 2 more weeks after this week, and then after next week, we'll be at the halfway point. We'll get a better read on a lot of things because we know, Casey, once you run into that Thanksgiving week is really when the storylines change a lot, because you'll look back from Thanksgiving and go back to this conversation and say, what were we thinking about some of these teams?
Yeah, it is. Can you keep yourself in contention, keep yourself healthy for that kind of run? Because that's one of the biggest things that keeps teams from running, getting to the playoffs. Because they start to not get healthy. And the Eagles have not had that many issues in health. Knock on wood, that'll continue. But if they can stay healthy, I think they can continue this.
It's not the best team; it's the healthiest team, right? And on that, the Eagles have had some injury issues. They have just overcome them. I mean, to say, if I tell you Fletcher Cox misses 2 games and Ronald Darby, who you trade, Jordan Matthews for, misses 5 games now, probably 6 after this week, and you're 5-1 and your defense has helped you, you're probably saying that's not possible.
Yeah, you're saying that's really good, and they've had these couple of line issues too. So I mean, you start to add those together, and again against the matchups they've had, it's not been the easiest schedule. So yeah, it's really good. And if they get Darby back, I mean, now suddenly that changes the dynamic of that secondary, because you can already do a number of other things well, and stopping the pass and stopping the run. And now you've got, if not a shutdown corner, a B+ corner.
All right, KC Joyner here. By the way, a Shield reunion. Are we going to get the payoff on that?
I think we will. I think we will get a payoff on that. People want them back. They're even cheering Roman Reigns, and who would ever thought we'd say that again?
That's Sunday night. You can check out the Shield back in action. All right, Sunday Night Football, and of course the Eagles and the Redskins Monday night right here. The countdown to coverage kickoff coverage begins at 6:00 live from PB's in Glassboro. Casey, enjoy all the football. We will break down the Eagles and Redskins and all the Week 7 action on Monday.
Sounds like a plan.